As I listen to you, I think how scary it could be when you feel like you're losing yourself. You're losing your identity as to who you once thought you were.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was actually one of the first things I mean, like it was the moment that I hit my kitchen floor. So it was a Sunday morning, and just my entire world fell apart. And while I was on my kitchen floor, I remember thinking like, I just lost all of my identity. Like I couldn't be a business owner. I couldn't be an employee. I can't be a sister, a daughter, like none of those things that, now I define as roles in my life, none of those things I could be. And I was like, oh man, like I have no identity anymore. Like what's going to happen? Through the process of healing, I realized that my identity is Tiffany. And I have now set, pretty strong boundaries around making sure that Tiffany survives. And Tiffany remains Tiffany throughout all of the experiences, because that's the one thing that we bring to this world that nobody else can bring with us. And that is, our true identity. So once we are really solid in what that looks like, it's much easier. But the scariest moment, there was two very, very scary moments in that entire thing. And that was feeling like I lost my identity and not understanding who I was. It was terrifying. The other was not being able to trust my brain. And until you've experienced something like that, I don't even to this day, after all of the recovery and therapy, I don't have the words to be able to articulate clearly what it feels like when you have a thought that you cannot trust. It is something extra special, and not really in a great way. So, yeah, there was those two very, very fearful moments within, that process. Yeah, for sure.
Well, Tiffany, like you said, hindsight is, 2020 when we can look back and see how the dots connected. But I hear still that you're able to have this lightness, this humor of, it's very special way of, that this way of being has shifted you. And I don't know if it's too soon, but do you see that? Is there a gift in this experience that you have identified so
I
far?
have a number of them. Absolutely. Definitely not too soon. Um, there were so many amazing things. Like, don't get me wrong, it was a year and a half of the hardest work I've ever done in my life.
Mhm.
And I don't wish that experience on anyone. It was all of the things that you can imagine and more. However, I'm not one to dwell, and I have this belief that everything happens for a reason, and that reason for me was digging in and figuring out what did I learn from this. Number one lesson: my identity is Tiffany Connauton, and I own it and I love it more than at any other time in my life. So that was really, really awesome to come out of that knowing who I am and very deeply knowing who I am. So that was, I would say, the number one lesson that I got. Knowing that I'm not alone. When I hit my kitchen floor, um, I didn't know anybody else had gone through something like this. I didn't know that you could get PTSD from not being a frontline responder or in the military or, doing some of those immensely, tough jobs. I was like, that's how can we even have that? So new language, new perspective, new everything that came with this beautiful community of people that have also been there. So knowing that I'm not alone in any of this was fantastic. Double down on boundaries. Debra, I will tell you. I have some amazing boundaries in my life. I love them dearly. I respect them wholly. And that means, really understanding what self-care looks like. Like, how much do you want to grind and hustle? And for me, I don't. That's not how I want to do business. So,
Yeah.
some very clear boundaries about how I want to show up in the world, the things that matter, and, what the business not only does, but what it stands for, and how we do business is just as important. So, really honestly, I probably could talk for another hour on, what I've learned because I did a lot in that space coming out of it. I was like, it's not going to be for nothing. It can't be for nothing. That journey was hard. So it needed to teach me some really good things to carry forward and to share with everybody.
In these situations, I'm often reminded that, when we double down on certain things, we're also betting on ourselves.
I
Tell
love
me
that.
a little bit about what that doubling down and the boundaries and betting on yourself means to you.
there's two pieces to that. So there's like the personal side of things. So the doubling down on my boundaries and betting on myself and knowing myself to be authentic and transparent means that I have a schedule that includes people, and I have my people time all the time. And I do not give up my people for clients. I don't give up my people for money. The way that I do decision making is all based on values. And that resonates through my personal life as well as my business life. So, which are very well integrated on top of that. So I think that, that people over profits is something that was immensely important to me. And then the doubling down on some of the values that I held prior in business means that I get to sit in front of decision makers within organizations and listen with grace about how they don't have the resources to spend on their people and how they don't have the time to spend on their people and how changing an entire HR system is too hard and they can't do it for their people. And I get to nod and I get to understand, and transparently, I get to tell them that it's not good, because I've been on the kitchen floor, and there's not a single person on the face of this earth that deserves to be on their kitchen floor for trying to go to work and do a good job. I was trying to be a productive member of society, and it landed me on my kitchen floor. I was trying to be an amazing employee, and it landed me on my kitchen floor. Those two things cannot happen. So there's no excuse that is big enough for me. There is no barrier that we can't get through. There's no hurdle that is too high to jump over when it comes to we need to change the way that we do business. And that means really digging down and taking care of our people so that they can take care of our business.
Yeah. And when I think about people before profits, and I've heard Richard Branson, I've heard Dwayne Johnson, I've heard a number of individuals say that if you remember to take care of your people first, the profits will come, because you build loyalty, you build engagement, and you build people who feel like they're part of something bigger. And I think from, with your experience of being from the kitchen floor, from kitchen floor to supporting individuals and organizations to help shift that thinking, it only takes 1 degree to start creating the shift. And if we get more people on board, imagine if everyone is making that shift together. So that's why I'm really excited that you're on the podcast, because that's what we're doing today. We're together helping create this shift of helping people think differently about people and people in their businesses. So what are some things that help people feel more that they belong and they're part of the mission in an organization?
I think if we go big picture on that question, Debra, I think what we talk about in that case is we're talking about making sure that we abolish the systems of majority for a long time now. And I mean, it's prevalent throughout all parts of our society, but majority rules. And, whether we're talking about team building, whether we're talking about voting, whether we're talking about decision making within organizations, we do all of this based on the majority. And I think we need to stop that, to be honest, because there's no such thing as a majority anymore. We're starting to learn how individual we are. We all have different fingerprints, which means we are all wholly different human beings, and how we show up and why we show up and how authentic we can be at work is a driving force to that sense of being part of that organization. So the number one thing that organizations can do is to start dismantling those systems that work in majority. And one of the most simple solutions is any sort of team building exercise that you do or team gathering that you do within your organization. Make sure that you are allowing different people to run them, to organize them, making sure you have, simple rules in place that say you can't do the same thing more than once and, a certain amount of time. So it doesn't become a collective or a social event. It is there for team building. And building teams means stretching outside your comfort zone. It means doing things differently and working together. So that's a very, very simple thing that organizations can take on just to shift that, little tiny bit. And that little tiny bit of shift then starts leading into more. So majority rules definitely has to go.
Yeah. And when we think about, especially for people listening or viewing that have not been exposed to the difference between fitting in and belonging, I'll let you shed a few lights on that.
It is a very significant behavior and mindset shift that takes a while to get your head wrapped around it because we think that, fitting in is belonging. And the very whole scale difference is fitting in is me changing who I am to fit into an environment that is already pre-designed. That's fitting in. If we think about belonging, it's about shifting the environment as we have individuals coming in and out so that it's made for everyone. So if I think about how that looks within an organization, it is when you go to hire, you hire for fitting in. Are they going to get along with everybody? I mean, my first question is, it doesn't matter because really getting along is only part of the equation. And more importantly, it's what are they going to offer to the organization as a matter of, professionalism, performance, and success. So if we think about what that can look like beyond that, it's when I hire someone, I look for them, how are they going to get along with the people that are currently within the organization? Now, shifting into that belonging state is how is the organization going to shift to make sure that that person can come in and perform at their best? How are they going to show up as their best selves? How are they going to be able to contribute, both on a professional level as well as an interpersonal level to a team to make sure that it's elevated? And that is the difference in the mindset thinking. And that means that your culture is going to shift every single time someone leaves an organization or a team. And every time someone comes in, you're going to go through micro shifts. So there's systems that can be put into place to protect that, but it's really going from an individual to a team perspective.
When you talk about like an example of when people leave or come in, what is one thing that an organization or a group or a leader can do to help, maintain a culture and also shift the culture to continue it on its trajectory of the desired future?
I think what it is really setting down the expectations ahead of time. So it starts really in your recruitment and your hiring practices. One of the things that we're starting to see that works really well is in the disability space, there is this question that emerges, and there's still organizations using it today, was what accommodations do you need? And first of all, it's a little bit counterproductive, and there's a whole bunch of reasons we shouldn't be talking like that. But what we learned from that process is that individuals need something a little bit different in order to enhance their workplaces and how they work. So if we ask every single individual coming into our organization, what enhancements do you need to be able to do your best work every day? And that could be low lights. It could be, a break at 3:13 in the afternoon. The possibilities are endless in that space. But if we make room for those enhancements, then we're treating everyone exactly the same and we're seeing them as individuals. That starts the conversation in a very, very authentic way. And as we have people coming and going within the organization, it's about setting the expectation about what we expect. This is the culture that we expect. These are the behaviors that we expect. And then making sure that there's actually consequences and accountability around those behaviors. There's a lot of talk about the brilliant jerk within organizations. And there's so many organizations that will keep the person that is toxic to the culture because they do amazing work. But what they don't understand is that by doing that, they're protecting that, 10, 15% productivity from that one brilliant jerk, but they are reducing the productivity and really, really reducing the productivity of all of the teams around them. So they're not gaining 5 to 10, they're actually losing 50%, like when we talk numbers and productivity, because everybody around that brilliant jerk is now disengaged. They don't want to be there. They're distracted by the, toxic behaviors, and they're spending more time managing this one human's behavior and the effects of that than they are actually on work. So, making sure that there's accountability and structures around protecting that culture and setting the expectation that it's a priority.
Yeah. And that's so important. Like I haven't heard the brilliant jerk, but as soon as you said it, I'm like, oh, I know where they come from. Everyone knows one that's kind of disruptive, but not in a good way. May have brilliant ideas, may be able to do a good work, but is very much not a team player.
Yeah.
Right. So when I think about these opportunities to create change and changing the conversation, I love, I worked in a world where it was all about accommodations, duty to accommodate, famous words.
Yeah.
And then I was reading papers about ableism. What are you able to do? But I love the term enhancement, because if we approach things more from an enhancement perspective, we might be bringing people from not working, coming back to the workplace because of what, one, they're able to do and the enhancements offered to them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Especially when you hear about all the staff shortages, not hiring people who are able to perform and produce. If we're able to provide some of those enhancements, you might be surprised at what can happen. What are
Absolutely.
the possibilities for people? Because I think there's people out there who are already discounting themselves because enhancements are not available to them. So they don't even apply for the job.
100%. 100%. We self-select, and there's different parts of the population that will self-select out a lot sooner than others. But at the
Yeah.
end of the day, what we advertise as organizations for what will bring value to our companies is extremely important. And I don't think we've put enough time and effort into what that looks like externally. So when I read job postings that say, for instance, must have 15 years experience in, said role, it makes me kind of cringe inside because I'm like, 15 years experience means I warmed a chair with my butt for 15 years. That's literally what it means. There's no demonstrated value. There's no demonstrated skill set. Just because I was there for 15 years doesn't mean I was engaged for 15 years. I mean, we've seen what happens within organizations. So I think that it's really important to live the values that you want within the organization. And that means putting out the communications the way that you need to externally so that you attract the right people.
So if I was looking, like, let's say I'm looking for a job, or we have an organization re-looking at how they put their description as a posting, what are some things that myself as the person looking at the job, or the person who's revising their posting, what things should we be looking at?
Well, and I think that's a really good question. And I love the way that you approached it from both angles, because a lot of times we talk about what the organization can do. And I think that there's some things that as individuals we can do as well. Starting with the organization, focus on skills. What are the absolute must-have skills? And put some thought into this. And I use this example a lot. I was working with a client and they really needed someone that was amazing at diverse communication styles. And I asked them, I'm like, flat out, I'm like, would you hire a hairdresser? And they're like, well, no, they don't have communication skills. I'm like, let's think about this for a minute. How many people sit in a hairdresser's chair every single day? How many different diverse points of view? How many conversations do they have to navigate? How many different points of view? How many different belief systems? Like they must navigate in order to have a decent day of work. They can't argue with people. So they have these amazing communication skills beyond anything that a school can teach us. So would you hire a hairdresser for a communications job? I would in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat, I would. But we're so stuck on have you done this job for this amount of time? So my very first, kind of go-to is really dig down on the skills that are required to do the job and make those your mandatories and start getting honest with yourself about who can produce those skills. We talked about enhancements earlier. If we offer, several enhancements, how much does that grow the pool that we're looking at for those amazing, talented humans that can come in and help our organization? For those that are looking for roles right now that are, reading these job postings, the best advice I can give you is the world is shifting, but we're not there yet. So be brave enough to put your foot forward, regardless of what the posting says, because we're not going to start changing things until we all get a little bit braver and lean in and get a little bit uncomfortable. And that means from both sides. So if there's a job that you know in your heart is going to be the job for you, apply. Apply, recognize to the team that you don't necessarily meet the job description, but say these are the skills that I have that I know would be beneficial. There's ways to communicate your value to an organization, even though they're not asking for that exact thing. So be brave enough to go against what they're asking for and take the leap and apply, have the conversation. You're not going to be any worse off because you don't have the job right now. And if you don't have it tomorrow, then you still don't have it. So there's no downside to stepping in and being brave in that.